I knew something was off the moment I saw Lily sign that supplier agreement with a pink glitter pen. I don't mean metaphorically. She literally pulled a scented gel pen out of her Louis Vuitton pencil pouch, clicked it like it was a fidget toy, and scrawled her name across a $250,000 liability clause while humming some tick-tock song about margaritas and manifesting. That was the moment I realized the firewall wasn't the company's infrastructure. It was me, and I was about to get torched. I'd been at Pharmacine for 25 years, survived 5 CEOs, 3 branding overhauls, a merger that almost broke HR, and a ransomware attack that knocked out payroll the week before Christmas. I wasn't flashy. I didn't network. I didn't schmooze. I was the woman who could walk into a boardroom, say we can't ensure that, and walk out with everyone pretending they hadn't just soiled their Lululemon trousers. Risk officer wasn't just a title. It was the last stop before the cliff. But nobody notices the guardrail until it's gone. Then came Lily, 26, fresh out of B school with a LinkedIn headshot that looked like it belonged on a dating profile for hedge fund Nepo babies. She was the founder's daughter, which meant she skipped HR onboarding and waltzed into a director-level role with a bulletproof smile and zero understanding of what we actually did. Her business card said strategic impact, but her emails were riddled with emojis and things like let's circle back on that bandwidth synergy, which to this day, I'm convinced were just mad libs for middle managers. I tried. I did. I offered to walk her through the risk matrix, suggested she shadow a compliance review, invited her to a couple of our team stand-ups to see how we triaged vendor escalations. She declined each one with a tight little laugh and said, I'm more of a big picture girl. Apparently, the big picture didn't include liability ceilings, data retention triggers, or the tiny little clause in our umbrella policy that stated I had to personally sign off on every policy-related risk exposure. You know what else doesn't fit in the big picture? Watching someone like that prance through meetings unprepared, say things like we're totally covered even in class Roman 3 trials, right, Barbara? As if liability coverage were a fidget spinner you could wave in front of investors. Still, I kept my head down. I wasn't here to embarrass anyone. God knows I've worked with plenty of clueless men and lived to tell the tale. The difference with Lily wasn't just the cluelessness, it was the assumption that she was the smartest person in every room, even when she didn't understand what the room was. And before we go any further, if you're still listening and thinking, yeah, Barbara sounds like someone I'd want watching the guardrails, maybe tap that subscribe button and give this story a like. It helps more than you know, and trust me, my team deserves all the moral support they can get after hearing me tell this saga 15 different ways at happy hour. Back to Lily. She moved fast. Within a month, she was leading innovation initiatives and proposing we switch vendors mid-contract to align with our agility objectives. That alone nearly cost us $2.6 million in breach penalties, but I handled it quietly, drafted an exception memo, got legal to double back-channel the vendor's general counsel, and managed to reclassify it as a strategic migration. She never even realized what she'd done wrong. She just high-fived her assistant like she'd just cured lupus. I kept things running, quietly, efficiently. No drama, but I could feel it. The way she looked at me in meetings, like I was a leftover rotary phone in a 5G world. She'd smile through her teeth when I spoke, but there was always that little squint behind her lashes, like she was waiting for me to slip, or better yet, just disappear. The shift came during a routine client call, an oncology trial expansion with one of our biggest partners. Lily led the meeting, which was its own little horror show of buzzwords and PowerPoint gradients. She told the client we were fully covered under Tier 4 indemnity clauses, even in international jurisdictions, which was not only incorrect, it was dangerously, lawsuit-inducingly incorrect. I paused, waited, prayed someone else would step in. No one did, so I cleared my throat and said as gently as possible, just to clarify, our coverage currently extends only to Tier 2 liabilities within FDA-regulated regions. Expansion beyond that would require a new rider, which is still under review. The client nodded, took notes, thanked me. Lily smiled, blinked, said thanks Barbara like she was swallowing nails. Her knuckles were white on the mouse. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment I crossed the line from quiet firewall to threat that needs deleting. And let me tell you, when they deleted me, they also deleted the one name holding up their entire house of cards. We'll get there. The glitter pen was only the beginning. The meeting had barely ended when I felt it. You know that static in the air right before a lightning strike? That's what Lily's smile felt like. All teeth, no warmth. The client had just logged off, thanking me for the clarification about our coverage restrictions, and Lily had hit the end call button like she was swatting a fly. No recap. No great job, team. Just silence and that sharp, ice-pick grin. To be fair, I hadn't planned on speaking. I let her run the show, slides and all. But when she told a Fortune 100 client that our liability coverage extended globally, including non-FDA jurisdictions, well, that was the kind of thing that, if left uncorrected, could crater our insurance, get us sued, and maybe even endanger trial subjects. I mean, we were talking about liability exposure in countries we didn't even have compliance footprints in. Wasn't a whoopsie, it was an aneurysm with a font size, so I corrected it. Softly, clearly, with zero ego. I even said, just to ensure everyone's aligned, our current policy limits apply to Tier 2 coverage in FDA-regulated territories only. Expansion is under review but no formal approval yet. The client nodded, took notes, said, thanks for the clarity. Lily's eye twitched. I'd seen that twitch once before. Legal pushed back on one of her partnering with influencers' ideas for a clinical trial video campaign. She didn't argue, just nodded, smiled, and then disappeared into a meeting with HR the next morning. By end of week, that attorney had been reassigned to contract review duties. Never saw a client again. So when I got the email, subject line, follow-up chat, I knew exactly where this was going. HR, 11:30 a.m., with Pamela. Pamela, who just so happened to be Lily's mother. Pamela, who wore silk blouses and always smelled like an aggressive potpourri blend from a suburban boutique called Lavender and Lawsuits. Pamela, who once referred to my OSHA presentation as overkill for people who know how to sit in chairs. The email was short, 2 sentences. Hi Barbara, can you stop by HR at 11:30? We'd like to discuss your tone on today's client call. Tone, not content, not accuracy, not the $19 million in potential liability I had just saved us from. Tone. I replied with a quick, of course, see you then. Then I sat back in my chair and exhaled through my teeth so hard it fogged my reading glasses. I wasn't mad yet. I was disappointed, like watching someone light a candle next to a leaking gas line and smile about the ambience. At 11:29, I walked into HR like I always did, badge clipped, notes in hand, calm face on. Pamela didn't offer me a seat, just pointed. Her smile was twice as tight as her buttocks allowed. Lily wasn't there, of course not. That would have required having an actual conversation. Pamela opened with, Barbara, we've received some concerns regarding the tone you used during this morning's client interaction. It's been perceived as undermining and dismissive. I blinked once. Mean when I corrected a factual error about our liability coverage? We're not questioning your knowledge, she said, folding her hands like a court stenographer about to fake a seizure. But when junior executives are leading key meetings, it's important we maintain a supportive environment. Your interjection could be seen as credential intimidation. Credential intimidation? I actually laughed, couldn't help it. It just slipped out like a cough. Pamela didn't flinch. She'd rehearsed this. Hell, she probably had a folder in her drawer already printed. You know, I said, if someone feels intimidated by accuracy, perhaps the issue isn't the credential. She raised an eyebrow. We're not here to assign blame, we just need alignment. Ah yes, alignment, the corporate term for stop being smarter than the boss's daughter. I kept my hands folded, my tone neutral, my spine steel. Pamela continued, let's consider this a coaching moment. Future interactions should aim to elevate, not correct. I nodded once. No fight, no defense, just a thin, polite smile. Then I stood up and walked out without asking if we were done because we were. I wasn't going to beg for the right to do my job properly. I went back to my desk and opened the compliance log, documented everything. Time, date, summary, just like always. Then I opened my private email, pulled up the copy of the rider amendment I'd filed 3 months ago, the one that tied our entire liability policy to my named risk officer status. I reread the clause twice. Automatic policy void shall be triggered 72 hours post-termination of named officer without carrier notification. My name was still on it, for now. The email from HR didn't scare me, but it did tell me one thing loud and clear. The countdown had begun. I showed up at HR the next morning in my usual navy blazer, thinking this would be a checkbox meeting. Maybe a verbal warning, a stern talking to about tone, followed by some passive-aggressive documentation in a file no one would ever read again. I'd been through these before, when a VP tried to expense a Vegas trip as a wellness summit, or when a junior analyst cried because I marked up her vendor risk matrix in red. This wasn't new. It was politics. What I didn't expect was the conference room already set with a printed packet waiting at my seat and Pamela, Lily's mother, wearing her I'm not mad, I'm legally prepared face. There was no small talk, no preamble, just Barbara, thank you for coming. Please have a seat. We need to discuss a matter of serious concern. I didn't sit, not right away. I scanned the table, no legal rep, no direct manager, just Pamela and another HR staffer I'd never seen before, clearly there to act as a witness, not a participant. That's when my stomach turned. After a thorough review of recent events, Pamela began, flipping to the first page of the packet like she was auditioning for a courtroom drama. We've determined that your conduct toward Director Lilly has created what we're categorizing as a hostile work environment. My eyebrows lifted. I said nothing. She continued, specifically, your behavior during the recent client meeting, combined with ongoing patterns of undermining and credential-based posturing, constitute workplace bullying under Section 4.3 of our professional conduct policy. Credential-based posturing. That was the phrase she used. Like having certifications, required ones, mind you, was the same as peacocking around with a fake Harvard sweatshirt and a podcast. I said calmly. If you're referring to the correction I made about international indemnity caps, it was a factual clarification. Pamela didn't blink. It's not about the facts, it's about the impact. She said that like she was quoting scripture. I sat down, slowly, looked at the HR rep next to her, 20-something, tapping nervously at her iPad like she was trying to type her way out of the room. What's the actual allegation? I asked. Pamela leaned back slightly, as if easing into her victory pose. We believe your presence in meetings has become combative. Your certifications and corrections, while accurate, are delivered in a way that intimidates and diminishes newer team members. This isn't aligned with our culture of support. There it was. The word I knew would come, culture. The final nail in the coffin when competency becomes inconvenient. You mean Lily, I said, flat. Pamela frowned. This isn't about individuals, it's about dynamics. I stared at her for a beat, then let out the faintest breath of laughter, not a real laugh, just enough to break the tension in my own chest. She slid the final page toward me. We're terminating your employment, effective immediately. Your badge has been deactivated. You'll be escorted to collect your personal items. No PIP, no 30-day grace, no manager present. Just boom, you're done. I looked at the page but didn't touch it. You understand this puts the company's coverage at risk? I asked, not with panic, just a flat, professional tone. I was genuinely curious if anyone had told her. Pamela's lips curled. We've reviewed our exposure. We'll manage. No, they hadn't. I stood. Picked up my leather binder from the chair beside me, the one I carried into every meeting since 2004, with worn edges and post-it notes that still smelled faintly like ink and peppermint gum. From the inner pocket, I quietly slid out a single envelope. Cream-colored, unmarked, dated 3 months ago. I didn't open it, didn't wave it, just tucked it under my arm like it was any other memo, because that's how you carry something dangerous when no one knows it's lit. Security met me at my desk. A guy named Thomas I'd known for years. He didn't make eye contact as I packed a small box, my framed certificate from the National Risk Management Council, desk cactus, and a USB fan that clicked every 3 seconds but kept me sane through 5 summers of HVAC failures. No one spoke. No one dared, not even Mary from accounting, who once told me I was the only reason she hadn't sued the place over ergonomic violations. I walked out without saying goodbye. They didn't take my laptop. I'd wiped it myself the night before. Call it paranoia, call it foresight. They didn't ask about active audits, or current contracts, or the open compliance checklist I'd been building for the new trials team. They just assumed once again that the firewall would reset itself. Outside, I stood in the sun for a full 60 seconds before moving, just breathing, just existing without the fluorescent ceiling buzzing above my head. Then I walked to my car, placed the envelope on the passenger seat, and finally allowed myself a long, slow exhale. They thought they'd buried the threat. They didn't know they'd just cut the power line, and the whole building was about to go dark. You'd be amazed how fast people forget you once your badge stops working. The first day after I was fired, I tried to pretend it was just another Friday. I even made coffee like I had a 9 a.m. call. My inbox had already been deactivated, no surprise there, but my phone still had a dozen numbers I figured would pick up. I called the CFO first. Kevin, same man who once told me if you ever leave, I'm leaving with you. Straight to voicemail. I didn't bother leaving one. He'd know why I was calling, or he'd pretend he didn't. Next, I texted a contact in legal, Monica. We'd gone to the same risk compliance conference in Boston and split a bottle of wine over horror stories about indemnity loopholes. Her reply came 20 minutes later. I've been advised not to comment on employment matters. Sorry, Barb. 3 hours later, I got another message from a junior analyst I'd mentored for 2 years. All it said was, I'm sorry. She said it was harassment. I didn't know what to say. That one stung. By Monday, the silence had calcified. Not even a LinkedIn message. Not a whisper from procurement, where I'd once walked a junior buyer through untangling a fraudulent vendor chain that saved us 6 figures. Not even a hey, how are you holding up from facilities, where I personally rewrote the fire drill policy after our intern locked herself in the lactation room. Nothing. They weren't just ignoring me. They were treating me like a contaminant, and I got it. Really, I did. Lily had called it harassment, which meant anyone who spoke up on my behalf would risk being dragged into her narrative. Credential intimidation wasn't just a stupid phrase, it was a weapon. A quiet one, when you couldn't defend against without sounding like you were trying to win. So I said nothing. Not to them. Instead, I opened my personal laptop and dug up the email I'd sent myself 3 months ago. Subject line, Risk Amendment, Writer 14C notarized copy. Inside, 2 attachments. First, the scanned letter from Mutual Shield Insurance, confirming the risk policy adjustment effective May 14. It had the carrier's signature and mine, along with language that made me smile grimly now. Coverage shall be contingent on uninterrupted designation of Barbara Lynn, NRMO, and shall retroactively void if said party is removed without carrier notification, with a 72-hour window to correct. Second, a timestamp memo I'd written after my first uncomfortable meeting with Lily. Dated, detailed, labeled plainly in the footer, for personal records only. It documented her dismissiveness, her refusal to attend a compliance briefing. her flat-out denial of policy documents. And it ended with one line, bolded and underlined. Should employment status change due to non-performance-related concerns, this memo may be used to confirm misalignment with procedural protocol. Not sabotage, documentation. And now it lived, safely outside their reach, in my encrypted archive and on a thumb drive taped to the bottom of my kitchen drawer. I'd always known I wasn't safe there. You don't spend 25 years reading every worst-case scenario without wondering when your own file might become one. But this wasn't a worst case. It was just inevitable. People like Lily weren't trained to respect risk. They were trained to avoid discomfort. And I'd made her uncomfortable by doing my job too well. The irony was, I'd been the one who insisted we revise the policy in the first place. I'd been the one who told the board that tying coverage directly to my designation gave the company leverage during restructuring talks. Stability optics, we'd called it. Investors liked when named officers weren't musical chairs. So now, 3 days after they walked me out, they had an expensive lab onboarding a clinical trial under the assumption that they were insured. They weren't. And that little paper tripwire? It had already been stepped on. No one heard it click. That's the beauty of fine print. I didn't need to make noise. I didn't need to blow whistles or write op-eds or tweet bitter threads into the void. All I had to do was wait. They'd set the countdown themselves. I just made sure the clock was accurate. 3 days out and the company was already talking like I never existed. I wasn't surprised. Pharmacine moved fast, PR even faster. It's one of those firms that floods LinkedIn with inspirational quotes wrapped around stock images of pipettes and lab coats, like cancer research and brand synergy are the same thing. But I still read every press release, every post, every email blast forwarded by a friend too nervous to text anything else. The one that caught my attention was titled, Exciting New Partnership. Phase Roman II Oncology Trials Begin in Tri-State Region. There it was, buried 3 paragraphs down. We're proud to onboard Dr. Rajan's team under our current clinical risk coverage with full indemnification protocols in place. No asterisk, no footnote, no nuance, which meant they were treating the insurance policy like it was still active, which it wasn't. Not since 8:16 a.m. on Tuesday morning, 72 hours after they fired me without notice to the carrier. I'd marked it in my planner like a birthday, underlined it twice. The trial site they were onboarding, a high-risk vertical, first-time site, international vendors, unvetted third-party courier. It wasn't a casual onboarding, it was a compliance landmine, and they were walking right into it barefoot, thinking the boots were still on. The phone call I made that afternoon was short and surgical. I didn't need to vent. I wasn't calling to warn them. I wasn't even angry. I just wanted confirmation. The line clicked twice before a familiar voice picked up. Mutual Shield, this is Colleen. Hey, it's Barbara Lynn, quick one. Just confirming someone's still scheduled to be on-site for the Pharmacine audit Friday morning? She paused, then said, we are, but there's been an internal flag. We might escalate the audit scope. I smiled faintly. Understood, just wanted to make sure you had the right termination paperwork on file. We do, she said. And her voice had that same chilly crispness I used to love in a good underwriter. No wasted syllables, no warmth, just facts. It's been acknowledged. Appreciate it. We didn't say goodbye. We didn't need to. When I hung up, I didn't feel relief or victory. Just that cold, humming sensation in the chest you get when you know a storm's about to break, but it's not your house anymore. That night, I didn't drink wine or rage text old coworkers or write a manifesto. I made a pot of chili, watched a rerun of some baking show, and sharpened all the pencils in my desk drawer. It's what I used to do during pre-audit stress cycles, create order from the small things. But even as the credits rolled and I pretended not to check my phone every 5 minutes, I could feel the hours ticking. 12 till the press call with the new client, 26 till the investor check-in, 42 until the audit. The audit. It wasn't just routine this year. I knew that because I had made sure it wouldn't be. Months ago, before Lily ever stumbled into her director title in those ridiculous patent leather block heels, I had quietly amended the audit parameters with Mutual Shield. I wanted site security protocols reviewed, not just insurance logs. I wanted eyes on the actual chain of custody records for our biologic samples. Not because I didn't trust my team, because I didn't trust who would come after me. Turns out I was right. And now someone would be looking through every file, every employee role, every designation tied to our liability coverage, including mine, or rather, the lack of mine. They could write all the press releases they wanted, post all the client onboarding photos they liked. It wouldn't change the fact that there was no named risk officer on record, no active policy coverage, no replacement designation submitted, and unless they could go back in time and unterminate me before 8:16 a.m. Tuesday, every action taken after that hour was uninsured. Every lab shipment, every patient form, every contract, all of it, exposed. Tick, tick, tick. I imagined Lily striding around the office like she owned it, probably thinking the audit was a formality. She'd be rehearsing her little welcome speech by now, maybe even planning a catered lunch, assuming that the presence of a few tuna tartines and a name badge would convince the auditors we had our act together. But they wouldn't be looking at the snacks. They'd be looking at the signatures. And when they saw mine, terminated with no successor, the floor would start crumbling. The company didn't need me anymore, but the policy still did. They sent out the company-wide email at 8:04 a.m. sharp. Subject line: join us in welcoming our underwriter from Mutual Shield for our annual policy review. Exclamation point and all. Classic farm is seen optimism, like if you slap enough sunshine on a thing, nobody will notice the mold underneath. I almost choked on my coffee laughing. From my seat at the corner cafe across the street, I had a clear view of the glass entrance. It was the kind of place with automatic doors that whooshed open like you were walking into a spaceship. I watched them file in, one after the other, press suits, nervous laughter, tote bags branded with that terrible company logo they paid $300,000 to redesign last year. There was Kevin, the CFO, checking his watch like he was timing a kidney transplant. There was Monica from legal, holding her iPad like it could shield her from incoming fire. Few middle managers followed in clumps, all trying to look casual and curious, but you could feel the tension even through the glass. And then Lily arrived, front and center, wearing a fitted blazer 2 sizes too tight and a smile that looked fresh from a tutorial called How to Appear Competent in 3 Easy Steps. She was holding a clipboard. I almost snorted into my cup. That clipboard had nothing on it, just blank paper and bravado. She did a little greeting gesture to the arriving underwriter, whom I recognized immediately. Colleen, navy pantsuit, hair up, not the kind of person you hug. The kind of person who can spot a missing signature on a form faster than most people can find their car keys. Colleen did not smile back. I stirred my coffee. The wind shifted slightly, carrying with it the familiar city mix of car exhaust and bakery sugar. I'd chosen this spot intentionally, just close enough to watch it unravel, far enough to avoid being seen. Inside, Colleen was being handed the files. I couldn't hear it, obviously, but I knew the rhythm. I'd been part of this exact process more times than I could count. They'd start with pleasantries, then move into the policy binder, then personnel files, especially those tied to designation-sensitive clauses. Like mine, I imagined the moment she'd flip to my record. Termination date, Tuesday, 8:16 a.m. No replacement form filed. No updated named risk officer designation. No signed communication to Mutual Shield. Just a note, probably typed by Pamela herself, that I'd been let go for hostile behavior and credential intimidation. I could practically feel the chill that would spread from that page like black ink in water. I took a slow sip of coffee. Across the street, Lily was talking with big hand gestures, explaining something to Colleen while trying to look relaxed, probably filling the air with buzzwords like streamlining, modernized leadership, and cultural realignment. That woman could say 100 words and not deliver a single fact. Colleen nodded politely, said nothing. She was probably already reading the names on the file labels, seeing mine. That's the thing people like Lily never understand. Real authority doesn't make noise, it just waits. And sometimes, it hides in the places you think you've already swept clean. I'd seen the audit prep checklist they used every year. I wrote half of it. And right there, around item #14, was the line, confirm named risk officer designation is current and actively employed. They never removed it. They never thought they'd have to, because they never imagined I'd leave. They never imagined what leaving would cost. I leaned back in my chair, watching the boardroom blinds shift closed. Colleen had been ushered into the war room. It was beginning. I didn't need to be in the building to know how it would go. I could see it in my head like a stage play I'd rehearsed 1,000 times. Colleen would sit, open the binder, read the policy, then the personnel file. She'd see the date, see the lack of replacement form. She'd pause, she'd ask who is currently designated as the named risk officer, and the room would fall silent, because there wasn't one. Because they never named one. Because they didn't think they had to. Because they thought firing me was just a clean break, a win in a petty turf war between a girl with too much power and a woman with too much memory. But they weren't firing a nuisance. They were deleting the last legal firewall between their multimillion-dollar trials and complete noncompliance. They'd handed over the file, and inside that file was the key to their unraveling. I didn't smile, not quite, but I watched the clouds start to gather over that glass tower and thought, you should have read the fine print, sweetheart. Inside that glass conference room, when I'd sat in for over 2 decades, always at the far end, closest to the compliance folders and furthest from the pastries, Colleen sat in the same chair I used to occupy. She didn't touch the coffee offered. She never did. Mutual Shield underwriters came prepared with their own thermoses, their own pens, their own silences. You never really knew when they were judging you, only that they were, and it was permanent. Across from her, Kevin the CFO leaned back, trying too hard to look casual. He'd unbuttoned his collar, like the absence of a tie might convince her this was a friendly review and not a procedural execution. To his right, Monica from legal was typing into a laptop she wasn't looking at. Her fingers were flying. Her eyes were locked on Colleen's face. Colleen flipped through the binder without a word. Not rushed, not slow, just precise. Each page made a soft SHH as it turned, like the room itself was warning them to be quiet. Then came the personnel documentation. Page, flip, pause. She set one sheet flat in front of her. Read it again. Termination paperwork for Barbara Lynn, she said quietly, adjusting her glasses. Kevin chuckled. Oh yes, Barbara. We've had a few staff transitions recently. New energy, new direction, you know how it goes. Colleen didn't smile, she didn't nod. She just read out loud with the cadence of a surgeon listing causes of death, named Risk Officer Barbara Lynn. Terminated Tuesday. 8:16 a.m. Silence. You could hear the HVAC. She looked up slowly, pen resting against her lip like she was trying to decide whether to stab the policy itself with it. And who replaced her as named Risk Officer? Kevin blinked. I don't think we've officially filed that yet. We've redistributed the duties internally. Colleen's expression didn't change. Her voice dropped a degree. Did you file a named officer replacement form with Mutual Shield? Kevin's grin faltered. No. Was that required? That was when it happened. The moment. Her pen dropped to the table with a tiny tick. Then she leaned back in her chair, not out of surprise, not out of drama, just the kind of slow exhale you make when someone confirms exactly what you feared. She looked at Monica, then at Kevin, then back at the document. The policy lapsed, she said flatly, 72 hours after Barbara Lynn's termination, due to failure to notify an absence of a designated successor. Kevin's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I thought the coverage carried forward. She shook her head. No emotion, just ice. Only if the designation is maintained. It's in your policy addendum. Section 7C, I have the signed copy here. Monica's fingers stopped typing. Colleen continued, effective Friday at 8:16 a.m. Pharmacine has no active risk coverage. You are uninsured. As of now, nobody moved, nobody breathed. A faint clicking sound came from the projector, still displaying the welcome slide Lily had designed with little molecules dancing across the screen. Nobody noticed. Then, as if waking up mid-dream, Kevin reached for his phone. Colleen's voice stopped him. Before you make any calls, please understand that any actions taken under the assumption of current policy coverage after the lapse date are considered uncovered events, including clinical onboarding, third-party courier engagement, and data handling. She turned a page. Your contract with Dr. Rajan's team states indemnification as a condition of activation. If you've already initiated site activity, you've done so in violation of coverage terms. Kevin's fingers trembled. Look, we didn't mean to misfile. This must be a communication breakdown. Can we backdate something? Refile? I'm sure legal can. Colleen didn't blink. You cannot undo a lapsed designation after the window. You were advised of this during your last renewal review. Twice. Her eyes lingered on him a second longer than necessary, like she was wondering how many other things he hadn't understood. Monica finally spoke, her voice brittle. Is there any interim recourse? There is an emergency reinstatement protocol, Colleen said, flipping again, but it requires board-level approval, a complete operational freeze during reevaluation, and full audit exposure of the termination decision. The word termination hit the table like a gavel. And then, because fate has a twisted sense of timing, the door opened. Lily stepped in, clipboard in hand, bright as a new penny. Hey, everything going well in here? Colleen turned her gaze on her. Nobody answered. And for the first time since she'd arrived, Lily looked genuinely confused, not threatened, not irritated, just lost. Kevin stood. Lily, maybe step out for a bit, but I thought we were going to go over the audit milestones and now, please? She blinked. Okay, she stepped back out, the door whispering shut behind her. Colleen looked back to the table. Let me be clear. As of this morning, your organization is operating in violation of your own risk protocols. Any incident, no matter how small, would be fully uncovered. That includes client liability, vendor breach, and internal exposure. Kevin sat down, or more accurately, collapsed. No one said anything for a full 10 seconds. Outside the conference room, the office hummed along. Emails being sent, coffees being sipped, deals being pitched. But in that room where I used to sit, the air had gone dense. Heavy. I wasn't there, but my name was, and it had just detonated. One sheet of paper, one missing form. One woman they assumed wouldn't matter once she was gone. Turns out they were wrong. I mattered exactly 72 hours after they forgot I did. The moment the words "you are uninsured" left Colleen's mouth, the oxygen seemed to drain from the entire west wing of the building. Kevin's first instinct, like every finance guy clinging to a crumbling ledger, was to reach for his phone. But Monica had already beat him to it. She was murmuring into her headset, rapid fire, something about Clause 14, external counsel and non-notification exposure. Her voice was calm, but her hand was clenched so tight around her pen. It snapped mid-sentence and bled ink onto her blouse. Outside the conference room, someone was still trying to refill the coffee carafes. Oblivious, like the company hadn't just stepped off a cliff. Inside, Lily stood frozen by the door, eyes flicking from Kevin to Monica to Colleen, trying to triangulate who was most likely to blame for this sudden shift in tone. Colleen didn't acknowledge her, didn't need to. It was Kevin who spoke next, voice low and hoarse. Lily, can you give us the room? This is my audit too, isn't it? I mean, technically I'm the director of. He didn't look at her. Just repeated, please, step out. There was a long pause where it looked like she might try to push back. Then she glanced at Colleen again, misread the silence as invitation, and turned on her heel like a child asked to leave the grown-up table. As the door closed behind her, someone in the back of the room muttered under their breath. She said Barbara bullied her? It wasn't said loud, but it landed. Colleen raised an eyebrow. Barbara Lynn, you're terminated NRMO? Nobody answered. They didn't have to, because at that moment, everyone in the room was mentally rewinding the last 7 days. The termination, the HR memo, the fact that no one had questioned it. No one had paused. No one had asked the most basic, burning question. Wait, what was she holding up? Now they knew. Monica muted her call. Legal's recommending immediate freeze on all active trial operations pending policy clarification. Kevin turned pale. We've already onboarded Rajan's site, and the Halbert expansion was greenlit yesterday. 2 active contracts, one involving patient trials, the other involving cross-border transport of biologic materials, both written with indemnity clauses that explicitly required active coverage, both now in breach. Colleen spoke again, her voice cool and merciless. If I were you, I'd contact every external partner you've engaged since Tuesday morning. You'll need to disclose non-coverage status. Immediately, and the clients, especially the clients. Kevin rubbed his face like he was trying to erase it. What happens if they pull out? Colleen looked at him like he just asked if gravity was optional. They will. Across the building, phones began ringing. Executives started reappearing in hallways they hadn't walked through in years. Slack channels lit up with status pings, internal legal alerts, and a new file quietly posted in the #compliance ops thread. Urgent, policy lapse effective 8:16 a.m. Tuesday, someone added the eye emoji. No one reacted. Back across the street, I sat in the same cafe, watching the upper floors like a woman waiting for a verdict. I wasn't gloating, but I wasn't pretending not to know either. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, a junior staffer. I recognized the area code, the rhythm of the message. What did you do? I stared at it for a moment, then typed simply nothing. I just was. Another buzz. They're saying we might have to pause trials, like full shutdown. Investors are getting notified. What is happening? I didn't answer, because the real answer wasn't for them. It wasn't even about me. It was about the company finally learning what happens when you let pride run your HR department and nepotism sign the termination slips. This wasn't an accident. This was engineered fragility. They built the system to depend on a single named officer. They approved the amendment that tied $50 million in coverage to my existence. They ignored every compliance alert I'd ever sent. And when I was no longer useful, they didn't replace me. They erased me. But here's the thing about erasing someone who holds a keystone. The moment you delete them, the whole arch cracks. And now, there were cracks running through everything: contracts, reputations, market confidence. The investors wouldn't care about office culture or generational leadership. They'd care about why nobody noticed the gap, why nobody asked where the risk officer went, and why the answer wasn't a replacement but a complaint. Petty accusation backed by zero protocol. Soon, the clients would care too, because once word gets out that your trials are uninsured, no one's onboarding, no one's extending, no one's staying. Colleen would file her report. The board would receive it by Monday. And by then, the only thing left for Pharm-Assine's leadership to ensure would be their own exit strategies. The board call was supposed to be routine, quarterly review, budget alignment, usual dance of numbers and polished forecasts. Instead, they walked straight into a firestorm they'd lit themselves and somehow forgot to check for smoke. It started with the underwriter's report. Colleen, ever the professional, had submitted a formal coverage lapse letter by close of business Friday. Her summary was blunt. Due to non-notification and termination of named risk officer Barbara Lynn at 08:16 a.m. Tuesday. Policy lapsed at 08:16 a.m. Friday. There was no successor filed, no reinstatement initiated, no compliance review requested. That letter hit the inboxes of every board member, investor liaison, and general counsel before anyone could spin it. There was no time to bury it in committee meetings or tuck it behind performance charts. It was the first thing on the agenda. The second was worse. Someone leaked the HR memo. The one Pamela had written. The one that claimed credential intimidation and pattern of hostile tone in meetings. The justification for terminating the one person anchoring the company's compliance posture. It didn't take long for screenshots to flood Slack, then group chats, then anonymous Twitter accounts with handles like at Farm Insider and at Biotech Leaks. One account captioned it perfectly: fired for knowing too much. Lost $50M coverage. Daughter of the founder promoted same week. Replies weren't kind. Inside the boardroom, the tone wasn't just serious, it was surgical. The lead investor rep, a man with the voice of a retired colonel and the patience of a landmine, asked the only question that mattered. Why was our named officer terminated without notice to the carrier? Kevin stammered something about internal miscommunication. Pamela tried to deflect, citing emerging cultural values and rebalancing leadership dynamics. Monica, the only one in the room with a functioning survival instinct, didn't say a word. She just forwarded Colleen's email again. bolded. The board chair rubbed his temples. So let me get this straight. You fired the person whose name held the policy together, filed no replacement, opened a new clinical site during the lapse, and only found out because the underwriter told you in person? Silence. You understand what happens if even one patient experiences a negative outcome during this period? Someone coughed. Pamela opened her mouth. No, the chair snapped. Don't. Not a word. Across the city, I was folding laundry. I had just placed the last pair of socks into the drawer when my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. Unknown number. The transcript preview. Hi, Barbara. This is Cassandra from Pharmacine Legal. We were hoping to speak with you regarding. I swiped it away without listening. Let them hope, because there was nothing left to fix. The moment had passed. The policy was gone, the coverage was null, the liability was real, and the site they opened, the one they bragged about onboarding in their press release, it had already reported a cold chain breach in its initial supply shipment. Nothing catastrophic, not yet, but enough to require internal review, enough to require insurance, which they didn't have. The irony was unbearable. They had built the perfect trap for themselves. Every signature, every assumption, every smug little decision to prioritize egos over infrastructure, documented, sealed, activated, and all I had to do was leave. I didn't pull any levers, didn't leak any memos, didn't call a single reporter. I didn't even answer the phone. They'd done it all on their own, because a 26-year-old couldn't handle being corrected on a call, because her mother thought the word certified meant intimidating, because a company so obsessed with innovation never learned how to read the very contract that protected it. They weren't brought down by sabotage. They were undone by negligence, so ordinary, so arrogant, so familiar it wrapped itself around them like a silk noose. I didn't burn the place down. I just stopped holding up the ceiling. Let it fall. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit him.